Okay. There we go.
Good. Well done.
Good. Because I know some folks that cannot come at this time and they ask if we would record it. So,
Yeah, sure.
okay, sounds good.
I'll just wait for you to give me the green light when you want me to start.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Do you want me to turn the lights down here? Will that make it easier to see the screen? Okay. I will do that. Promise not to fall asleep sometimes.
Is that the sanctuary I see behind you?
No, this is our Grace Hall, which is just our nice meeting room.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's nice. We have a big projector. You can't see it either. We can kind of see it behind there. And then the sisters are sitting out there, and we have a good projector, and it's nice and loud. So that's good.
Okay. Looks like you have a lot of lovely light in there.
Oh, we do.
Natural light.
We do. Hey, Roberta, I'm glad you made it to this one. And it was all on me before, so I'm just glad
the flyer said 1:30, so.
I know, that was my bad. That
Oh.
was,
Oh,
that was
well,
all on me, so I apologize.
and then I figured maybe it was a time, difference, but it didn't say EST, so, I mean, it did say.
No, it didn't. It was my hiccup.
We all do it.
Well, I sometimes can be very calendar challenged. So
Tell me about it.
yeah. It's sometimes it's hard to do that. We're gonna give it's like yeah. Alice, we're saying hi to you too.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep myself muted because I have a bit of a cold and I tend to hack. And it would be better if you all didn't get to share that. So
Appreciate that. I will probably ask everyone when Deborah's giving her presentation to mute that way we don't have any accident background sounds, and I'll mute myself too because I know I'll do the same thing.
And I just practiced my speech this morning. And so it was a little bit of a relief when it turned out there was an extra hour before presenting it, just because my voice needed some tea with honey in between to recover. And I'm singing tonight. So
Oh, wow. Wow. Where are you singing tonight?
I sing in a chorale, and we have a performance coming up. So
wonderful. Hello. So much going on. I appreciate y'all being here. Mary, Sister Ann can go on Thursday.
Oh, nice.
So we're good.
Thank you.
All right. We're gonna give people a couple more minutes.
Jen, I will have to be leaving in about half an hour, so.
Okay, well, I appreciate that you're here now, and we will have it recorded, and we will share that with other folks that are interested.
Good. That's good.
Yeah. I know a lot of the Ohio Sisters Justice Network sisters want to watch this since Notre Dame Dignum Your Sisters are doing work with Beyond Plastics as well.
seems like you've made a great connection with Beyond Plastics, which is so great.
Yeah, we're excited
Is
about
there a
it.
chapter in Dayton?
No, there is not. Maybe we'll do that. We'll see.
Yeah.
We're not gonna commit, we're not jumping in yet. We got a lot of
Yeah.
irons in the fire right now.
You're taking some big strides already, it seems.
Yeah. Marita, give people a minute or two. Okay. We'll have a meeting with Tara Polling at the Prairie at 4 o'clock. So
Oh, it's
we'll meet. Okay, we can do that.
how long is the video?
So it's Deborah Burns is speaking in person. It's about 45-50 minutes. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
25 to 50, 45 to 50.
Yeah.
45.
Yeah. And if you have any questions at the end, she'll take questions. She might have questions for us too.
I do.
Hey, well, y'all know where the bathroom is. You have to go to the bathroom, get up and go. All right. Ugh.
Is it a beautiful day there?
It is gorgeous.
Here too.
All right, I have the microphone for the sisters here. I don't think you probably need it, Deborah, but so I want to welcome you all for coming. Happy Earth Day. I forgot to say that earlier today. Happy Earth Day, which is why we have this presentation. Hold on, there's more people coming here.
I just admitted them.
Okay, thank you. So we decided that we wanted to do something, the Justice Committee wanted to do something to honor Earth Day today. And so we are part of Ohio Sisters Justice Network, as you all know. And the Sisters of Notre Dame de Namur in Cincinnati have started working with Beyond Plastics to do something to make a difference about plastics in our world. I've read and written about how we consume plastic in our bodies because everything in the world is plastic, or at least contained in plastic. And we try to do our best with recycling. And sometimes we do what I like to call is wish cycling. And I knew I used to do this a lot where I would throw things in the recycle bin and say, oh, I'm sure they'll recycle this. And that's untrue. In fact, that's a really counterproductive because it can destroy the equipment where they sort it. And it can also contaminate a whole lot of plastic that then they can't recycle it at all. So I'm learning to not wish cycle, which really breaks my heart. Sometimes when I throw plastic of number 6 in the trash can or one of those. And I know that Sister Noreen was telling me at lunch today that she just watched a video from Rumpke, which is the people that pick up the trash in Dayton. And they have a video showing how they sort out their recyclables. So I'll see if I can find that video and share that with you, because I think that would be really interesting. Oh, it was in the paper today, Sister Noreen? Yesterday. Okay.
About 2 years ago, they also advertised that if a person who was recycling, if they had 2 items in their recycle 2 times, they were off their pickup list. It sounded pretty serious to me.
Yes, so if 2 times you were caught with things that couldn't recycle in your recycle bin, they take you off their recycle list. I think that's probably true. However, I was the queen of wish cycling and they still pick up my recycling, so maybe it depends on who it is, which company. So, all right, so without further ado, I'm going to let Deborah introduce herself. She is a volunteer with Beyond Plastics. And she'll tell you a little bit about they're with college. Is that right? Bennington College or Bennington
Yes.
University?
Bennington
And she'll
College.
tell you about that. And so I'm gonna, what?
Where is that?
It's in New Hampshire,
It's in Vermont.
Vermont. Said the wrong thing. It is Monday. You all know I'm having an off day, right? So I'm just gonna turn it over so I can't say anything wrong again. All right, without further ado, Deborah, go ahead.
Thank you so much, and happy Earth Day, everybody. It is a beautiful day here too, and I love the fact that I'm on one edge of this time zone and you're all on a very distant other edge of it. I think that's so fascinating. So my name is Deb Burns, and as you know, I'm a volunteer with Beyond Plastics, whose mission is to end single-use plastic pollution. So thank you so much for inviting me. I'm a mother and a grandmother, retired 2 years ago after 30 years as a book editor. I live in Massachusetts. I love local history and music, painting, walking, bird watching, native pollinators, and more, probably like many of you. And 2 years ago, I took an online course offered by Beyond Plastics, led by Judith Enck at Bennington College. And after that, they asked if I'd like to be trained as a speaker. And they're always looking for speakers because every speaker tells a different story. So if you're interested, let me know. So in this talk, we're going to sort of go macro and go micro. We're going to circle the globe. We're going to peer into the human bloodstream and plant vascular systems. And we're going to spend a little time with Dayton itself, because I've been fascinated by, what I've learned about the activist community you have. So before I go on, I just do want to reiterate that this will not be a guilt trip. The plastic problem is not of our doing, our making, and it isn't our fault. The responsibility lies way upstream with the producers. This talk is meant to be informational so we can understand the issues and not be bewildered or terrified or alienated or completely turned off, and so that we can have some tools. I'm going to talk a lot about rivers. They carry the brunt of the problem, the burden of plastic pollution. And your state is certainly rich in rivers. I know its name comes from the Ohio River, which I believe is this photograph. This photograph is of. It looks a little, it's not quite crooked. It's not quite straight on the horizon, but and that name, Ohio, in turn, I've learned, came from the Seneca word Ohio, meaning good river. And you, of course, are bounded on the south by that river and on the north by Lake Erie. And looking at a map, I noticed that the Little Miami River flows from near Dayton to Cincinnati and the Ohio River, then to the Mississippi, to the Gulf of Mexico, covering more than 1,300 miles and a great deal of our country. What a beautiful river it is. And I've learned that it was formed by glaciers, as our area was, my area, and is described as flowing through a deep gorge with wooded bluffs and rolling farmlands. Hundreds of species of wildflowers, almost as many tree species, migrant and resident birds, and fish, smallmouth and largemouth bass, plus other species of bass and catfish and bluegill and more. And the river course is also rich in human history, Indian camps and earthworks, settler mills, inns, travelers' tales. Rivers are considered sacred in cultures that pay attention. Your state considers this one a national treasure. In many spiritual teachings, rivers are a metaphor for life itself, the journey from source to sea, from birth to final merging in the primal ocean. In the book of Revelations, John envisions the river of the water of life, bright as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and of the Lamb. So the river of life itself. In many ancient cultures, as I'm sure you know, a soul must cross a river that separates life from the afterlife. So the Greek Styx, the Norse Kjol, the Mayan Chipalba, the Japanese Sanzu. Some believers see rivers as living goddesses providing sustenance and renewal. The Ganga Ma, for example, Mother Ganges. And this is where she rises, her birthplace, the Ganges, in a meltwater cave 3,000 meters or 10,000 feet above sea level at the base of the Himalayan glacier known as Gangotri. I wonder if anybody's been there. I actually have way back in my 20s. This, I believe, again, is the Little Miami again. And rivers are a mystery. They carry, they cleanse, they provide fertility, and they steal it away. They swell and shrink, freeze and thaw, fill and refill. They replenish themselves, they replenish us. They receive and they give. In ways, they define us. Indigenous Americans thought of land in terms of river systems, not civil borders and boundaries. Many states, this is a terrible, it didn't come out very well, but I think you can get the idea that many state borders are defined by rivers, including your state's southern border, the northern bank of the Ohio River. I hadn't realized that briefly in 1763 or so, that northern bank was briefly the southern border of Canada, which I thought was really interesting. Some state borders occur in the middle of a river, but not all. And this little map shows states, all the states that have river borders, which are much more interesting and significant than square borders, I think, which seem very arbitrary and imposed. Rivers reflect us. In some mythologies, they heal us. After Cuchulainn, the legendary Irish hero, slew his foster brother in battle, he had to bathe in each of the 20+ principal rivers in Ireland in order to cleanse himself from that terrible sin of killing a sibling and to restore balance and healing, which is seen by some as a symbol of the division between Ireland and Northern Ireland. I share these ancient myths and legends to remind us how closely connected we are to rivers, how fundamental they are, how sacred, just to go back to this one, how they reflect us, how they tell us who we are and reflect that back to us, and thus how vital our responsibility is and our stewardship, our work to keep them clean and flowing. Your community has a beautiful phrase on your website, care of creation, as part of your mission. And I think that's a beautiful phrase and one that, feels in some ways more friendlier than stewardship. Rivers are also such a metaphor for flow and movement and for the choices we make in our lives and for other real world systems and processes. So I'm going to tell the story of the river of plastic that flows through our lives and makes a vastly bigger negative impact than we may realize. So it starts way upstream from us with the manufacturer, and it keeps going through our use of the plastic and then goes downstream and ends up often thousands of miles from where it started and in a big mass of sibling plastic. I'm also focusing in on a micro level to tell the story of an actual river near me, the Hoosic, or more specifically, the Green River that flows past my home to its confluence with the larger Hoosic, and then on to the Hudson and the Atlantic Ocean. So I'll discuss that river's history, its entanglement with plastic, their journey to the sea, the consequences, the future, as sort of an example of one river, but I think many rivers have a very similar story with their own special features. So although I'm focusing on one river, this situation, the plastic crisis, doesn't involve just one river, it's every river. And although I'm speaking from a US perspective, I've tried to include relevant info from Canada and other parts of the world as well. I'm hoping you can picture your favorite river as we talk. And I hope it's less complicated than the river I live by and I'm using as an example and metaphor. Your own river can tell its own story. I grew up here in Williamstown, Massachusetts, which, like other New England towns in the 50s, and I'm sure also in Ohio, was a bucolic place of farms and elms and steeples nestled in the hills. But although my town looked and still looks like a postcard perfect village, during my childhood, you couldn't swim in our rivers. They were too filthy in the 50s. But of course, they weren't always that way. This region is the homeland of the Mohican people, Mahicanatuck, who roamed through these valleys, managed these forests, fished and hunted game, and saw the world in terms of river systems, not town lines and state borders. Their river system is what we now call the Hudson, along with its tributaries. They called it the Mahikanik, which means the place of the waters that are never still, describing how the Hudson is a tidal estuary with tides reaching all the way north to Troy and Albany, about 150 miles. This is the view looking north from Storm King Mountain, which is about 80 miles north of New York City. The Walter is still salty here, and brackish as far north as Poughkeepsie, which is about 60 more miles. So that continues for a long time. The native people of our area left few permanent traces, trails made by their footsteps, stories of encampments at warm springs, a collection of arrowheads and spear points along a particular Hoosic River beach. Some of these are dated at more than 5,000 years old. But the thing is, there's very little litter. There are these small items that might have been dropped or might have washed up, but compared to some of the images that we'll be looking at a little later in this presentation, it's quite remarkable. So for my fellow map lovers, here I am in the northeast corner of the US, where Massachusetts and Vermont and New York State meet. The Hoosic in blue starts at the lower right and collects waters from the Berkshire Hills of Massachusetts and the Green Mountains of Vermont. And then the green arrow shows the Green River, which drains the west flank of this kind of bulge down in the right, bottom right, Mount Greylock, the highest mountain in the state. And then the Hoosic, the Green River flows within earshot of my house and then joins the Hoosic in town, where it's joining the blue line. They then amble together northwest into Vermont and then New York State, picking up other brooks and streams that rise in the Green Mountains and southern Adirondacks. The Hoosic is quite mighty by the time it reaches the Hudson. That confluence occurs at a town called Stillwater, despite the original indigenous name, waters that are never still. From there, the Hudson flows south, except when the tide rolls in, which it does for about 150 miles to New York City, where it meets the Atlantic Ocean. Back to the Berkshires. As you may guess from the topography, this is a land that, like yours, was shaped over centuries by glaciers, which rose high above Greylock, that mountain I mentioned, and over time melted into lakes and ultimately rivers. And our area, like most places, was settled because a river runs through it. And like so many rivers, this one was taken for granted as an endless resource and one that would sweep away every sort of waste. That will be a recurring theme on the mini scale and the monumental scale. In the 1700s, with European settlement, farms grew up along the river, and pastured animals wandered freely in and out of the water, standing there all day if they felt like it. Still the case until recently. Small-scale industries also arose along the rivers, and then factories, ultimately in this area employing thousands of people and churning toxic waste into those waters all day, every day. In the 1900s, we in the United States became a throwaway society of disposable goods. Unlike previous generations, we'd lost the skills to fix broken things or adapt and repurpose old things, because rivers so neatly and conveniently carried away waste and trash. People in our area and many other places routinely disposed of junk by throwing it off bridges. People tossed garbage, food waste, broken stuff, dead things, you name it, except we didn't have plastic yet as a major contributor. But even in winter, we let trash pile up on the frozen sheet of ice, not just one river, but every river. That may seem incredible that we would just toss it off a bridge onto ice, but they must have felt there was nowhere else to put their trash. In Williamstown, people brought their old appliances to a place on the bank of the Hoosic River that we locals nicknamed the Great White Dump, in honor of all the stoves and washing machines and refrigerators hauled there and abandoned. Nowhere else to put those either, evidently. Consequently, during my teens in the 60s, the rivers were more polluted than ever. They smelled bad. We turned our backs on them. Not just we in Williamstown, but we as a country. Not just this river, but every river. Meanwhile, downstream in the late 60s, Pete Seeger was spearheading an effort to clean up the Hudson, which he called this dirty stream, full of industrial waste, sewage, and rubbish. He led the building of a traditional Hudson sloop, the Clearwater, to publicize the issue, saying that cleaning up a river was a cause worth fighting for. He and many others fought to promote the Clean Water Act, finally signed into law by President Nixon in 1972. In the 1970s, as environmental awareness surged around the world, recognition here dawned that we had been poisoning one of our most precious resources. Local visionaries founded an organization called the Hoosic River Watershed Association, or HURRA. It still exists and thrives. Hurrah! Work got underway, resulting in major cleanups, laws to prohibit discharging toxic waste into rivers, etc. We got rid of the Great White Dump. Williamstown celebrated with an annual Riverfest, which still continues, this year with a cleanup, live music, and haiku. And people could enjoy the rivers again. But we had no idea what was to come. Difficult as the previous waste problem was, it is dwarfed by the crisis of plastic waste, which cannot dissolve into the earth the way organic waste might. Instead, it travels and gathers and interferes with lives small and large. It can break down into microparticles so tiny that they can potentially end up in plant vascular systems and even in the human bloodstream. I'll come back to that. And it flows and ultimately forms unacceptable permanent cities of plastic trash at the end of the waste stream. Plastic is so appealing at the beginning of its journey, cheap, lightweight, and colorful, but it's appalling farther down the line because we as a society haven't understood what it really is or thought about what will happen when we're through with it. So pervasive is plastic pollution that the United Nations identified it as the second most ominous threat to the global environment after climate change. And this year's Earth Day today is the principal focus. The top priority is plastic. I became concerned about plastic pollution by simply walking along our road. It winds along the Green River, and of course it's called Green River Road. Often, and especially when the roadside snowbanks melt in spring, I'd see an abundance of takeout containers from McDonald's and Dunkin' Donuts, as well as Pampers, plastic bottles, beer cans, nip bottles all over the place, scratch tickets, dental flossers, cigarette butts, and more. This is all discarded carelessly by individuals, but although that's very irresponsible on a small scale, it simply isn't that simple. In fact, by some estimates, there's much less litter today than a few decades ago, but its content has changed from cardboard and paper, which eventually dissolve into the earth, and glass and metal, which can be reused, to plastic, which is basically immortal. For this, the true and great responsibility lies with the producers. The companies that make plastic containers and packaging that are intended to be used only once and then discarded. Repeating that, they're intended to be used only once, yet these producers have produced no realistic plan for properly disposing of those items, no recognition of these materials' extremely long lifespan. Who are these producers? They are familiar names on the world stage. The plastics industry is one of the largest manufacturing industries in North America. Globally, plastics production is dominated by large chemical and oil and gas companies, including Dow Chemical, ExxonMobil, Sabic, Chevron Phillips Chemical, and others all over the world, generally sited near deepwater ports. These chemical companies are usually multinational. This one, Linde, for example, is the world's largest industrial gas company by market share and revenue. It was founded in Germany, was incorporated in Ireland, and is headquartered in the UK. Its scary motto is, Linde is everywhere. For some time now, one sector of the fossil fuel industry has been petrochemicals, developed from non-renewable bedrock energy resources, such as coal, crude oil, natural gas, and petroleum products. Petra means rock in ancient Greek, as I'm sure Bible readers know. These resources are called fossil fuels because they formed from fossils. They're the remains of ancient plants and organisms that lived in the great swamp forests of the Carboniferous period around 300 million years ago, eons before dinosaurs. So I should just point out I don't know if you can see on your screens, but this image does show dinosaurs, and I didn't know that until it was blown up and I saw it large. But so dinosaurs did not exist at the time that these layers were being laid down. What were creating those layers were sponges and corals that died and sank to the ocean floor of the time. And over millions of years, those remains were gradually buried and crushed under layers of rock and transformed by heat and pressure and time into oil and natural gas and oil and coal. And today we drill down through those layers of sand, silt, and rock to reach those deposits. And then industries develop these into fuels to run our vehicles and heat our homes and power the electric grid. But in recent years, alternative renewable forms of fuel have surged into the market, meeting enormous and growing customer demand. Solar power, for example, is 80% cheaper now than it was 10 years ago, and demand is growing by leaps and bounds. Great news for the environment. But for the fossil fuel industry, it has not been great news. This has threatened the loss of a huge market in gas and home heating oil. Renewables have just become so popular. So the petrochemical companies had to regroup and to be able to stay alive. And what they did was pivot from plan A, the fuel and energy production, to plan B, plastic production, which also uses fossil fuels, uses the same raw materials to produce plastic. So here you can see from plan A, just the fuel being dispensed through gas pumps, and plan B being made into these various different products, from cups to bags, to bottles, to flatware and things like that. And this is the moment to mention the career advice offered Dustin Hoffman from the 1967 film The Graduate, a reference or a foreshadowing that I did not understand at the time. Mr. McGuire says, "I just want to say one word to you, just one word." Benjamin, "Yes, sir." Mr. McGuire, "Are you listening?" Benjamin says, "Yes, I am." Mr. McGuire, "Plastics." Benjamin, Exactly how do you mean?" Mr. McGuire, "There's a great future in plastics. Think about it. Will you think about it?" The word plastic comes from the ancient Greek word plastikos and the Latin word plasticus, meaning capable of being molded without breaking. First, it was an adjective and later a noun. Using new technology, the petrochemical companies made an enormous investment in cheap natural gas in order to produce plastic. Today, almost all plastics are made from ethane, a byproduct of hydrofracked natural gas. But what is hydrofracking? Hydro is ancient Greek for water. Aulic is ancient Greek for pipe, thus hydraulic. Fracking is modern slang for fracturing. Hydraulic fracturing or fracking is a drilling method used to pull petroleum, that is oil, or natural gas from deep in the earth. This step in the process is called extraction. In the fracking process, cracks that appear naturally below the Earth's surface are opened and widened by injecting powerful streams of water, chemicals, and sand at high pressure. Then it's possible to access the natural, with other pumps and other pipes, the natural gas and pump it up into a well near the surface. But it turns out that, like oil production, plastic production is fraught with environmental and health problems throughout its course, from extraction to production to use to so-called disposal. At the start, well drilling activities produce air pollution and may also remove large amounts of vegetation. And they destroy wildlife habitat, spill into water systems, and disrupt entire ecosystems. Farm communities in parts of the Midwest have been chopped up and then abandoned due to the extensive infrastructure. These activities require both above and below ground. And I don't know if Ohio has experienced some major fracking work, but you're nodding, and I imagine it really is. Then laying pipelines to carry natural gas from wells to refineries usually mean you have to clear land to bury the pipe, and this is Australia. Often huge amounts of water must be brought in. And natural gas can leak from a pipeline and then into an area where it shouldn't be. You can sort of see the fractures at the bottom, and then it's pulling it, there's all these vulnerable spots along that pipeline. Leaks are considered very dangerous since they can build into an explosive concentration. They can kill plants and trees, cause explosions and fires, release greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, and make people sick. What are greenhouse gases? They are gases in Earth's atmosphere that trap heat and keep it from leaving the atmosphere so that our planet heats up. Here are two cute molecules that make up greenhouse gases. Methane is CH4, one carbon atom bonded to 4 hydrogen atoms. Ethane is C2H6, so 6 hydrogen atoms bonded to 2 carbon atoms. Methane, which is generated by a variety of sources, is a primary greenhouse gas. Natural gas is mostly made up of methane and ethane. Ethane is mainly used to produce ethylene, which is a feedstock for making plastics. Methane is naturally found under the ground and under the seafloor. And when natural gas is processed, methane is released into the atmosphere, just like what happens with processing crude oil or mining oil. Ethane is also found in the exhaust from cars and trucks, and that's where the ethylene is the next step in that. But so once at the plant, a river of liquid natural gas is fed into enormous furnaces and heated to extremely high temperatures, allowing molecules to be separated and turned into different plastic products. The process of making plastic products is emissions intensive. In other words, it produces smog. Emissions are what come out of exhaust pipes and smokestacks. They're emitted by the factory and create air pollution. Toxic pollutants emitted include gases like benzene that have been proven to cause cancer. Sorry. Although plastic waste and litter are a mammoth problem, climate scientists are even more worried about these greenhouse gas emissions. Scientific American calls plastics plants the next big carbon super polluters. They add a boom in petrochemical plants driven by cheap natural gas could lock in greenhouse emissions for decades to come. And Beyond Plastics president Judith Enck says plastic is the new coal. Since greenhouse gases are a principal cause of global warming, at the top level, dealing with the climate crisis requires dealing with the plastic crisis. Nevertheless, globally, money is pouring into petrochemical projects that promise new jobs and meet the huge global demand for plastic. These plants make the plastic used in single-use water bottles, grocery bags, takeout containers, and such. Let's look at one of these new companies. There is deception in its very name, the Sunshine Project, which is along the Mississippi River south of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, part of the Formosa Plastics Group. The name Sunshine implies something healthy, clean, benevolent, and renewable, when in fact, plastic production is none of those things. In order to make plastic, you have to burn natural gas, resulting in the emission of toxic pollutants, including those cancer-causing gases. But here's how the vision is articulated in Sunshine Company info. Quote, the industrial complex will produce polyethylene, polypropylene, polymer, and ethylene glycol that are found in everyday products that help make our lives safer, healthier, cleaner, and more efficient, end quote. This photo from the Washington Post shows a comparable plant along the same stretch of the Mississippi. So the Sunshine Company is still in the planning phase, but this shows what it might look like. The caption here in the Washington Post said, industrial plants and flooded farmland near St. James Parish, Louisiana, not far from where Formosa hopes to build their own huge plastics manufacturing complex. This area is not far from a part of Louisiana known as Cancer Alley. Unfortunately and tragically, The Sunshine Project is sited next to a predominantly African-American community in St. James Parish. The plant will sit directly on top of up to 7 cemeteries of enslaved ancestors of the current residents. And it is 1 mile from an elementary school. It is expected to be fully operational in 2029 unless certain lawsuits prevail, but so far they have not been successful. So then, after all the trouble and damage that plastic production causes, the contaminated ecosystems, the leaks, the displacements, the emissions, the cancer statistics, the plastic bottle produced by such a company and millions of bottles like it will be used once, then tossed into a river or into an overflowing recycling container. The products this company makes will transform into litter and clog our planet as this plastic river widens out into an excess of non-biodegradable forever trash. Clearly, there's too much plastic. Most of it cannot actually be recycled, and it won't disappear with the next rainstorm. It comes down to what that bottle is made of. 1/2 of all the plastics ever made were manufactured in the past 15 years. These companies produce astounding amounts of plastic with enormous investment in marketing, but no consideration for plastic's immortality, no concern for the deadly effect of single-use plastic product, 15 million tons of it every year, on our fellow creatures and our oceans and air. No comprehensive, realistic plan for effective and safe disposal or recycling processes. So I just interjected this photo and ones like it are what changed my life and made me decide to try to work against the plastic proliferation. But these photos are so shocking, and that they're images from way far the other end of the earth in many cases in the southern hemisphere. There's no, let's see. So yes, so how can that driver or anyone dispose of that bottle in a responsible way? Unfortunately, we've not figured that out, although we're under the illusion that we have. The fact is that recycling is not what most of us think it is. Even if we toss that bottle into a recycling bin instead of out the car window, the real world statistics are not impressive. The US has no nationwide bottle bill. Only 10 states and 1 territory have bottle bills at present: California, Connecticut, Hawaii, Iowa, Maine, Massachusetts, Michigan, New York, Oregon, which has the best system in the US, with 86% of the public participating, Vermont, and Guam. This number has stayed the same for at least 5 years. Only 8% of plastics can be recycled in the US today, and that percentage is going down. Only 9% of the 8% of plastics that can be recycled are recycled. Oregon's redemption rate, where that means how many people redeem their bottles and cans, their redemption rate is 80%. Maine's is 78%. My state's is 38%. I think the easier and more inviting a state or province makes redemption, the more effective it is. There's been a lot of experimentation, some with positive results and others with sort of clarifying failures. Now compare the US to our neighbor to the north, Canada. In all 10 provinces of Canada and 2 of the 3 territories, they have bottle bills. All 10 provinces and 2 of the territories. Nunavut Territory is the only region without a program yet. Ontario and Manitoba currently limit recycling to alcoholic beverage containers, whereas the other darker green provinces are dealing with all beverage containers. And you can see, well, we'll go on to the next slide, because you can see that California, Oregon, let's see, I guess that must be Indiana, anyway, or Iowa, and Michigan, and then the Northeast. It's a lot of places where there are not bottle bills. We'll get back to that. So redemption programs where you turn in the can or bottle for some money back have proven to be effective. When the first such bottle bill passed, 75% of roadside litter vanished. The thing is, it's not easy to know what to do because the relevant info on products is often so minuscule you can hardly find it, let alone read it. It's as if it's of very little importance to the producer. FYI, the info on this can top is in the northwest and southeast quadrant. What you can get in what states. I think it's California, Michigan, Oregon, are offering 10 cents back, and Connecticut, Massachusetts, Maine, New York, Vermont, 5 cents. Hawaii and Iowa, I'm not sure. That number is not stated, but that number is actually very important, the 5 cents versus 10 cents. Most US states offer 5 to 10 cents, but Canada offers up to 25 cents in some provinces for larger bottles. And charts show that where the deposit is more than 10 cents, the redemption rate is significantly higher. In other words, 77% of the public redeems their cans and bottles. And Massachusetts, again, it's 5 cents and the redemption rate is 38%. It's probably a psychological boost to have a spiffy setup like this one in Saratoga Springs, New York, found in some Targets, Walmarts, Hannafords, Price Choppers, etc., or this kind of glamorous one in Germany. Customers do report, though, that self-service machines are fun, but not always quick. Once you deposit all your bottles, which that's what takes time, you press a button for a slip to bring to the register to redeem. But I think it is just as efficient, perhaps more efficient, to take these items to a recycling place. So one family describes this place and says, "We pulled up at the redemption center with 12 garbage bags full of bottles. We carried them into the building and dumped them onto the counter. The 2 employees counted the cans and bottles so quickly that we found we had over 620 plastic bottles, cans, and glass bottles. They gave us cash and we walked out with over $32 within minutes of pulling in. It turned out to be so much easier and faster than feeding 1 bottle at a time into a machine." So I think that's really interesting. Plus, there's sort of a human touch there that is very meaningful. Oregon has some innovative programs, such as a bottle drop program that automatically credits the customer's account within 7 days. And according to some accounts, what used to be taking up to 30 minutes at a reverse vending machine, which is what they're called, a reverse vending machine, because it gives you money back, this procedure can be done in a minute or 2 at something called Stream Count AI. Customers simply empty bags out on a conveyor belt and leave, while AI software rapidly counts the containers and sends them a credit. I'll just say the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act of 2023, which we'll talk about again a little later, that covers bottles containing everything from water to wine, as well as tea, yogurt, energy drinks. This is what's in legislation. It's being pushed forward now. But that is a very comprehensive bill in terms of containers. So containers can be glass, plastic, or metal. So yeah, so this is which countries, I Googled to find out which countries are doing the best job at managing plastic. And I was most dismayed to see that our country doesn't appear in the rankings at all. Let me just go back to the previous. So you can see Canada, a couple of states in the US, Australia, and some European states, countries, including the northern countries of Europe. Apparently there's some sort of tension between the northern countries of Europe and the southern countries in terms of who's doing a better job and who's got systems that are working. I think they don't have a comprehensive continent-wide system, but they're trying out different things. So yes, Canada, Rwanda, Kenya, Germany, Norway, France, Chile, Sweden, Peru, India. When you look at that list and you imagine the problems that so many of those, the problems and difficulties and challenges so many of these countries, especially in Africa, India, that what they're facing and the fact that they are really taking it on. I think some of these countries that have ocean frontage are, see the crisis so fully that they've had to get active about it. But there are some places where you can be arrested for having plastic containers in Africa because the situation is so desperate, and that that they just it's just not part of the culture anymore in some places. And I guess that's what we have to aim for. And what about in Ohio and Dayton? So you probably know this logo. Perhaps you may be able to say more in our discussion time, or tell me by email later. But in my research, I saw that Waste Free Dayton appears to be offering strong leadership, and that addressing plastic pollution is their top priority. And one example is that the reduce and reuse refillery, that you can refill your container with shampoo or whatever, and they say the shampoo has a very nice orange scent. So I don't know if that rings a bell, if people have tried that, but it seems like it's a city with quite a few activists. The sense is that the citizens passionately want the region to be healthier, more equitable, and more sustainable. And here's a nice graphic from the Solid Waste Authority of Central Ohio. So Ohioans, they are excellent at recycling. On the other hand, the state of Ohio is suing the city of Athens to stop that city's plastic bag ban, which went into effect on January 1. And I'm so curious about that, the fact that there was a bag ban underway in Athens, and then now the state is banning it. So it's similar perhaps to what happened in Canada, where they had a nationwide ban, and then the Supreme Court of Canada said that banned the ban. So said that it wasn't, I guess it wasn't equitable, it wasn't fair to the producers. So and here's you probably recognize these, I'm sure, but this is another one from Waste Free Dayton. But this local impact, local efforts seem to me the most important news and the most important message on this Earth Day. The knowledge that we can start by working in our own communities, for example, to reduce plastic takeout containers. In my town, in Williamstown, I'm so proud to say that 9 years ago, our annual town meeting, shown here in a strange shade of purple, passed a bylaw prohibiting use of single-use bags and styrofoam in stores and restaurants. So that was in 2015, and that has held up well. The stores and the restaurants have, risen to the occasion, and they all have found, many have found their own ways of doing it better. But but it's comparable in our small town. This is what we did. I shouldn't say we, because I was actually not here then. Even though I grew up here, I was away then. But and it sounds like there's things like that happening in Ohio. As for recycling, all of us can put only 1 and 2 plastic in the recycling bin, although 5 is coming along. The numbers indicate the molecular structure of plastic. So 1 and 2 are the only plastics that are actually recycled at present. This is so confusing for people, and I think it's intentionally misleading. We're showing a film festival in Williamstown for Earth Week, and there's a film that I'm going to be presenting the story of plastics tomorrow. And then I saw in one of the other films that the college here has added a public service announcement in which they say, here's how recycling works. And they said, you can recycle everything marked number 1 to number 6, and 7 you can't recycle. And I was going, what? That is so inaccurate, and that a college should be believing that, and then advertising it, publicizing it that way, when it's very wrong. And it's what's, it's making this everything much harder is when there's misinformation like that. But as you may know already, I'll just go on to the RIN code, the resin identification number, that tells you what kind of plastic the material is made of. And as these code numbers go up from 1 to 7, they indicate that the molecules that make up those materials are more and more tightly bound and complex. Note that even though the chasing arrows, and those are the arrows that make up the triangle, they imply recycling. That was what it was designed for long ago when they designed this little emblem, this logo. It was meant to show that recycling would would move things through, but it was supposed to also show sort of an endpoint. So anyway, there's a lot to that little symbol. But these the chasing arrows imply recycling, but that is not the reality with number 3, which is PVC on up. So PVC is polyvinyl chloride that cannot be recycled. It's vinyl. And number 6 is polystyrene, either hard styrofoam or soft foam. And the graphic's strong implication is that number 6 can be recycled because it has that little emblem. But materials made from polystyrene are not recyclable and must go in the landfill. The most commonly recycled plastics are number 1, PET or polyethylene terephthalate, and number 2, HDPE or high density polypropylene or polyethylene. Plastics 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 are generally tougher to recycle and are not universally collected in local recycling programs. A number 1 bottle can be shredded and melted down and spun into thread and become polyester. It's the same as the polyester fabric, but the carbon chains get shorter each time the plastic is melted down. In other words, the plastic fleece jacket cannot be recycled again, and there are concerns about the nanoparticles it sheds. Bottle caps are made of number 5 plastic, the polypropylene, which is theoretically recyclable, but actually is only in a few communities. Even clear bottles, plastic bottles, number 1, can be recycled only a couple of times because the carbon chains get shorter each time it's melted down. So rather than being made into another bottle, PET typically is downcycled into fleece, fabric, and carpets. But here's where wish cycling comes in, which Jen referred to before. We want to believe recycling works, and we don't see an alternative. And so we'll put just about anything made of plastic into the recycling bin, just hoping it'll get dealt with down the line, just thinking they'll have a plan for this. Especially this happens if companies try to fool us by giving their products nature names. Do you ever notice how many of these products are named like Dawn and Tide and Cascade, Sea Breeze? They're very positive sounding. So I'm just going to take a sip of tea. So then what happens to once the object is put in the recycling bin? In fact, wish cycling causes enormous problems for the recycling industry, as does improper recycling in general. This is a peek at a Pennsylvania worker on the disposal service conveyor belt, hand picking out recyclables from non-recyclables, which might be plastic bags, wire hangers, these are the non-recyclables, wire hangers, string lights, broken glass, food contaminated items like pizza boxes, and inadequately washed plastic peanut butter jars, and generally plastic labeled 3, 4, 6, or 7. The truth is, though, that we won't sort, collect, or recycle our way out of this crisis, warns Beyond Plastics. This isn't how we'll solve the problem, because we don't yet have the techniques or the vision or the commitment to accomplish change. The only real solution is to stop making so much single-use plastic. In other words, stop at the start. But how do we stop this plastic Goliath? Laws are needed to make policy, especially the very important EPR. So that's extended producer responsibility. In a nutshell, it means you make it, you take it. This requires that the producer take extended responsibility for the product throughout its life. Specifically, the producer uses recycled materials to manufacture and market products. The producer is responsible to collect, process, recycle, and dispose of both the product and the packaging. So as one action point is to ask our reps to co-sponsor this. It'll take all of us in our country to make this happen in every state. Pepsi is actually currently being sued by the Attorney General of New York for pollution of the Buffalo River near Niagara Falls. People cleaning the river found pollution in the form of plastic Pepsi bottles at different stages of breakdown, and this has been studied, and plastic contamination was confirmed, as was the presence of microplastics. Back in North Berkshire, we can now see that every piece of single-use plastic trash is the product of the complex and quite dirty process of extraction, transport, and processing of plastic. And although every piece has been used only once, its journey is far from over. 8.8 million pounds of plastic enters our oceans from the land every year, and some percentage of that comes from right around us. So what happens to it then? Our trash makes its way down the roadsides and riverbanks into brooks and streams, tumbling and stumbling along, encountering curious turtles and ducks and herons and raccoons, tangling with logs and branches and nests and fishhooks, washing back up onto banks for a while, washing back out, and continuing downstream until it works its way into the ocean. And there it remains for a while, swirling in and out with the tide, catching on fins and tails and rudders, being ingested by fish and sea mammals. Plastic is very confusing to animals, many of which ingest it, thinking it's food. 1,500 marine species have been recorded to do so. Or plastic might resemble a potential mate. There's just some salty humor, because this can be a challenging subject. You know you're talking to a plastic bag, right, Bob? Okay. Or it might get picked up by curious seabirds and brought home to their nests, or perhaps it's co-opted by an enterprising seahorse. Or it joins the masses of plastic waste in the ocean and washes up on shores far away. This scene is being repeated on downstream on beaches and riverbanks all over the world. Here's the Ganges. Or in a different but all too common scenario, on that plastic bottle's journey down the Hoosic to the Hudson to the sea, or down the Ohio to the Mississippi, or the Ganges. It's exposed to sunlight, the start of a process called photodegradation. It gets brittle, and the ocean currents shred it, and one plastic water bottle becomes thousands and even millions of pieces of microplastics, which are bits of plastic less than 5 millimeters in diameter, and nanoplastics, which are less than 1/1000th of a meter, much too small to see with the naked eye. Macroplastics are the large ones. Plastic bottles, flip-flops, which are very common, washing up on shores, and various odds and ends, straws, plastic packages. You can see various of that in this photo. It shows macroplastics in the Mediterranean. Here's a filament of microplastic, like a bracelet on the arm of a snowflake. Yep, it's so tiny and so toxic. And in this microscopic close-up taken in the Adirondack Mountains of New York State, this insect has microplastics plastering its entire body. That's not the insect's choice. It's the result of our choices. Many microplastics and all nanoplastics are too small for us to see. Those minute particles can be taken up by plants or float into the atmosphere. They turn up in bottled water, in foods from shellfish to fruit to honey, in animal bodies, including our own. When they enter our bodies, microplastics and nanoplastics are thought to travel easily through our bloodstreams because that is what our circulatory system is brilliant at doing, in the same way that our rivers are brilliant at distributing macroplastics. And these little pieces travel through plant vascular systems See the red dots and red arrows, because that is also what those systems have evolved to do well, conduct materials along. This slide shows the potential effects on plants: membrane damage, chlorophyll degradation, chromosome changes, DNA damage. We're only just beginning to understand the profound effects of micro and nanoplastics on our own health. Recently, scientists have explored the role of nanoplastics as endocrine disruptors, chemicals in plastics mimicking human hormones and interfering with healthy function, implicated in early puberty, low sperm count, and more. Even sometimes, in some cases, suspected to be involved in ADHD and autism. This is a new area of research, and the topic could fill an entire evening's discussion. But Beyond Plastics is working with biologists and immunologists in North America and Europe to learn more. So returning to the human scale realm, dumping our trash into rivers is not new, as we noted. It's something we've done for eons. Not one river, but every river. The waterway conveniently carries it away and out of our consciences, out of our consciousness and our consciences. But the nature of what we toss, plastic, its momentary usefulness, its very long life, its potential to break down into nanoparticles, ultimately affecting the well-being of all Earth's creatures. This has changed without most of us even noticing. Our awareness must expand. It's not just one river, but every river, and it's every ocean. We humans living now have no choice but to look squarely at plastic pollution, ask why there is so much of it, comprehend its consequences, turn our minds toward ending it, and demand action. There's a worldwide target of 2040 for ending plastic pollution. The magnificent news, though, is that people care. According to a global survey, 3/4 of the people responding want single-use plastics banned. More than 8 in 10 people and nearly 200 countries support a global plastics treaty, an international agreement that is currently being negotiated to combat plastic pollution. Green organizations, large and small, have pivoted to pay attention. As one of many examples, the Clearwater has moved on from the macro pollution in the Hudson to concentrate on plastic pollution in our waterways, particularly microplastics. Clearwater has now been sailing for 55 years, I might add. And we do have visionary and activist leaders worldwide, and a younger generation that's passionately in love with our planet. We can do this. This is one way change begins and how it succeeds. That's reason for hope. But remember, we must remember when viewing pictures like this that sorting, collecting, and recycling plastic, though necessary and essential, are still insufficient. The problem is much bigger. We have the desire to tackle it. What we need now is the legislation. One proposed law that I mentioned earlier is the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act. That and other bills are underway, and Beyond Plastic and other groups are working to pass them all over the country and federally. This legislation would require bottle bills, ban bad products, and require EPRs, the extended producer responsibility. And you can join a vibrant grassroots movement determined to end single-use plastic pollution. You're invited to visit the Beyond Plastics website, beyondplastics.org, see what's going on, and join the mailing list. You could set up a chapter in Dayton and consider taking a training and becoming a speaker to tell your story. To conclude the winding river that is this talk, here are some action points suggested by Beyond Plastics. Host a supermarket plastic packaging take-back. Help restaurants skip handing out single-use plastic and Meals on Wheels too. Ban the sale of single-use plastic water bottles. Host a screening of the extraordinarily eye-opening film, The Story of Plastic, winner of an Emmy and many other awards, and I just recommend that highly. And follow it with a panel discussion. And Beyond Plastics has many more very practical suggestions on their website. In summary, the voyage of plastic begins long before the Coke or water bottle flies out the car window onto the riverbank. We must look directly at the beginning of that journey and to demand accountability and responsibility from the producers, those who have endlessly created plastic products with no concern or responsibility for the life of those products beyond their purchase by consumers, and with disregard for the many, many lives these products harm. So this is happening. This is happening. There is a movement building, and there's attention being paid at all levels of government. There are great minds at work trying to find solutions. Join us. And thank you very much.
Thank you so
I'm going
much.
to stop
Deborah.
sharing.
Okay, we appreciate your presentation. It was very interesting, connecting it to the river, since we're very connected to rivers, as you said, in Dayton, Ohio. So I will start. If anyone has a question that you want to start with Deborah, if you are on screen, you can just unmute yourself and ask it. And if you're in the room here, I will hand you the microphone. Anyone?
And don't forget, I have questions for you too.
And I have ideas, as the sisters here know, I'm an idea person. And I like to, when we have something like this, have an action that maybe we can move towards. So I've got ideas, but you want to start with your questions to us, Deborah?
Well, I guess I'm interested in that back and forth about the plastic ban we're in Athens, which is the University of Ohio, correct? Is that the?
Yes,
That's
so the state of Ohio, in our not infinite wisdom, has passed a law banning plastic bags. So that law is already in effect. And so the city of Athens said, there's a loophole in that. And they said, as a municipality, we want to ban plastic bags. So they passed that. Now the state of Ohio is suing them because you can't pass laws that are contradictory to your state laws. But there is a loophole in that, and I know that Cincinnati is working on something similar. But I think it's very complicated because in general, you can't pass a law that goes against a state law, and a state can't pass a law that goes against a federal law. So that's the story with that.
And have there been any politicians or, that have been sort of supporting a movement to minimize plastic, or is there anybody that stands out?
Not really. We don't have a very progressive environmental agenda at our state house, I would say. Differently to that, though. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think it is important, and I think that was what was surprising to me. With we've been fed all these years that recycling is the way to go, like recycle, and it's good. Don't get me wrong, but that is really not going to solve our problem. We need to get rid of single-use plastic, and I'm really proud of the sisters here and working in Salem Heights, which is the retirement home, a mother house for the sisters. That there are a lot of things that have been happening to make steps in that direction. We were looking at going to boxes of water versus water bottles, looking at doing, looking at other ways that we can reduce plastic and can't think of anything off the top of my head right now. We're also looking at doing some composting and using bamboo products and things like that. But it is complicated because everything is in plastic, like you said.
And really, I think the focus, needs to be on the single use. Otherwise, it's overwhelming. And if there's, I think that is where the efforts are being made most successfully. And of course, single use turns into trash right away. And there's so many things wrong with single use plastic bags and stuff like that I think that's a great area to concentrate on. But yeah, I've read about certain activists in Dayton, and I can't remember her name, Heather maybe, or anyway, that have been making waves, and but I guess one has to keep making those waves and not give up just because the state is closing its door to these ideas.
Well, a year ago, for Catholic Sisters Weeks, we bought a bunch of reusable grocery bags and donated them to different grocery stores and food pantries. So that was one way to kind of reduce plastic
Yeah.
bags. One of the things I was thinking of is that even though we can't get plastic bags banned, what if we wrote to and we petitioned to, say, Kroger, because Kroger's in Cincinnati, it's not in Dayton, and ask them to not use plastic bags. You think of different grocery stores like Trader Joe's, no, sorry, Whole Foods, where if you bring your own bag, they give you a wooden nickel, and that you can donate that money to something else, you know, or incentivize it. I think that if you were shopping at Target and they said, hey, you know, for 5 more cents, you can use a plastic bag, a disposable bag that's compostable. I think a lot of people would say, I'll pay the extra 5 cents to get a
Yeah.
compostable. I've told many sisters this. I was in Italy a couple years ago, and every kind of bag you get at the grocery there is compostable. And they have big bins outside in all parts of Rome that you put your compostable, you can put your metal, you can put your glass, you can put your paper, and everyone does it. You know, it's just what you do. And so they don't have a plastic bag issue because all their bags are compostable.
Is
But,
it,
I mean-
are they paper or cardboard, the bags, or what?
No, they're like, they look like, and they feel like plastic, but they're kind of thin, but they're made out of soy, so they
Oh, okay.
compost.
Hmm.
So I mean, I think there's things that we could do, that we could write letters to places like Kroger, we could write letters to places like Target. We could work with Sister Terry Walter writes what do we call the proxies for the investments the sisters have. We could see what investments, what big corporations that we have investments in, and make a recommendation with those companies to start using some of these kind of bags.
That would
It's-
really
it's a
fit your
possibility.
mission so well.
Yeah. Does anybody else have any ideas? Fine.
You know, Kroger was supposed to ban their plastic bags by 2025 until this thing came around, this
Oh.
ban, and they got a lot of flack from it. But in their stores now, they have plastic bags. I mean, regular bags you can buy instead of using their plastic bags. And what's really interesting, I found, is some of the clerks are very, they're against using Kroger plastic bags.
Hmm.
They'd rather use the paper, but they have a hard time finding them because everybody brings out the plastic bags for them to use. So if you get involved in a conversation with them, they'll tell you, and they'll go find the paper bags for you. You know, so it's just a long process. But one of my questions is, have you or anyone else tried suing or making some kind of connection with the different companies, you know, that produce the plastics, the bags?
Um,
And probably each area is different.
yeah, I think, I mean, I think that's a good question. I suspect that's been a challenge because of, you know, the financial wherewithal, but I should look that up, because it seems like a very logical approach, you know, and why isn't that more, you know, on our priority list? I think that's a good suggestion. And I love the fact that you've sort of looked inside a little more closely at Kroger's and seen, you know, what the staff is really caring about, and that, you know, that it just feels like there's possibility there, you know. These things just take a long time too. It doesn't happen overnight, and I think the people that have accomplished stuff have just been persistent for, you know, years. So it's still worth it. Every inch of effort makes, contributes. But yeah, I think I wrote down that about Kroger, and I'm going to pass that along and also see about other efforts where in a particular, I mean, I would think some of the sort of health food store, wild oats type places, I know that they already work hard to have really good packaging, like where you have bulk nuts and oats and things like that, and just to have either people bring their own, or you have paper bags. There's and then that the actual plastic that is used is one or two. So I mean, there are groups that are succeeding at setting up standards that their customers really care about and believe in, and that customers choose to shop there because of those standards. So I think there's a lot of possibility on an individual, maybe not corporations, but companies.
Yeah, I think it is used to have to sell it right, to let them know, because I do think that individual people are very committed to it. And while they may not turn in a can for 5 cents to get the 5 cents back to turn in to recycle something, that they probably would also then pay the extra 5 cents to get a bag that's compostable or paper
Yeah.
of some sort.
Yeah. Or the
So,
nickel.
yeah.
I just had two more things. I had two more things to mention that just occurred to me. Was somebody else speaking?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Well, one thing is that in preparing this presentation, you've come up against so many pictures of animals who are, getting the brunt of this, and whether it's a whale's stomach full of plastic, or whether it's a bird tangled up in plastic, or there's a picture of the turtle with a straw stuck up its nose, someone got it out. But those are appalling, and I actually find them too upsetting to include, because they are so and especially if I'm speaking to a group with children, like middle schoolers or something, I feel like I haven't been using those really visceral and upsetting images, because I feel like the images of trash mountains in the southern hemisphere on tropical beaches, with somebody steering their boat through a canal through just mountains of garbage, those seem to me just as powerful in some ways, and they're just a little bit more of a remove. I just wondered if other people had any opinions about those kind of shocking images that are sometimes what is needed to, move the arrow.
Anybody feel strongly about replying?
Well, I have one more thing to, my second thing was just that, I loved seeing, I was looking at your website, and the international mission that you have with, is it Guatemala and Brazil? Not
Chile.
Brazil,
Chile.
Chile, yes. And I've noticed that Albany, New York, which is not far from here where I live, has just partnered with Manaus, Brazil, on the Amazon. So it's way up the Amazon, to deal with plastic, together have a partnership in dealing with plastic pollution. And it just seemed like a really, I don't know exactly what it means, how it plays out, but just having that sense of a partnership with someone in a different situation, and yet one that's got similarities, feels like a really positive thing. Anytime you can sort of join hands, and you're already joining hands with, Central and South America. So I just wanted to mention that to you so you knew about it.
Yes, I know that when we talk about the Care for Creation, Sister Terry Walter and Sister Joyce Kale are in Guatemala, and they talk about the river of plastic that's not far from where they live. So, you know, it is around the world for sure.
Mhm.
So-
And in that,
Well, I hate to shut this down, but I have got to meet, we have actually a solar field on our property here. And we have a prairie that grows underneath it. And I'm meeting with our consultant on the prairie in 9 minutes, so I have to shut this down. Thank you all for attending. Thank you so much, Deborah, and I will share a copy of this for those to ask for it. And thank you all for coming.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day.